gonna find out. We're gonna find out, because we're live. The only problem with this angle is I'm gonna have a hard time seeing comments. What if I go, I'm always struggling with this idea of how do I set this up? I could get a little closer. What if I go down a little bit? Bear with me, I just fired up. I'm trying to get some, if I put that down there, we'll try that. We'll try that. We're gonna work on some grammar, a little bit of grammar. Well, actually I wanted to talk about morphemes a little bit tonight. Morphemes sounds like a real fancy word. Morphemes, morphemes are just units of meaning. That's all it means. We're not going to get really fancy. I just want to talk about it. I want to talk about a morpheme is just a unit of meaning. There's this lady out here in, she's actually down in, I think, Coeur d'Alene, somewhere in the U.S., Cree Literacy, who my wife used to watch her on Facebook Live all the time, and she would just, for like hours, just sit with a pen and just talk about morphology, I guess you could say, or just like all of the things you could do with the language. And I just thought, my wife still goes back and watches those videos, and I always thought that's just a really cool way to kind of talk about the language, talk about all the things you can do. So what are some ones we can talk about? I'm not going to get right into primary derivation or the primary units. We'll talk about some that you can use in lots of places. So let's do, there's a few that come to mind. So one is like, you see this one a lot, ito. Here's another one, isso. What's another one? There's a bunch that are like, maybe I shouldn't write them that way. Ito and isso. Should I write them this way? I don't know what's the correct way to write them. Like this, I guess. There's one set that's or stum or stamaw. Staw and stamaw. We could talk about those. These are all very similar, this group, depending on the word, depending on what you're talking about. Let's see if I can get a little closer here, down a bit, right there. And I gave you some examples of these. So this one here, we'll come back to these in a minute. This one here, ito, they call that, it's called a reciprocal. And an example of that would be, let me just use a totally different page for that. So if you take the word sageheu, means that person loves someone. That one loves someone, okay? If you break this down into like its root, so sage is like the, I don't know if you call it like the root or the stem or whatever you'd call that. But if you go from there, if you break this down, there's actually some kind of like boundaries or something in here. So we have sage, and then there's this H, they call that the causative H, and then this is the direction marker, and then these two bits mean sort of like who's loving who, or what direction it is. But this is interesting. If we go back to that ito, which means reciprocal, that sort of means like each other. Okay. Then what we can do is we can take ito and we can put it here after that H, and we get sage. We can go that causative H, we can go ito. And then that sort of changes our final here. you could, in theory, say sagito. It wouldn't make sense grammatically because by virtue of putting that reciprocal in there, we sort of need to make this plural. Sagituak, they love each other. Sagituak. Sagituak, they love each other. So they call that the reciprocal, right? So that ito. So similarly, we can do this with iso. So that's another one. So like this one, what do they call that? Iso, I think they call that the reflexive. Not that it matters. I think that's what that's called. That just means like oneself. So it's like, instead of like being each other, it's like back on yourself. So we can do the exact same thing with that word, sage. So this part, which is like, I guess means love. There's more to this than that. And then that, what they call that, the causative H or whatever, but then we'll do the same thing here. So we can take sage, that H, and then iso, and again our final. The other interesting thing is that when we do this, we actually change the verbs. We change sort of like if you understand your 4 different verb types, right? There's like your verbs that involve nobody. There's your verbs that involve one person. There's your verbs that involve one person and one thing, and then there's your verbs that involve 2 animate things or 2 people. I guess you could think of it that way. So this verb here, sageheo, that person loves someone, that's this one here. That's that verb that involves 2 people or 2 animate things. But when we add that ito or that iso, it changes it. It changes it into this one. And now, and the reason that's important is because the way that we conjugate it matters, right? Because it's different. There's different charts for this than there is for this if you're studying things that way. So this one here now is, I guess you could say this, sagiso. The way you'd say that, sagiso. That person loves themselves. I guess you could say it that way. That one loves themself. I guess you could say sagisoak. They love themselves. Sagiso. But you hear that somebody will say that. You could say that as a command too without the double on the end. Sagiso. It's kind of like, I guess you could say that. Love yourself. Usually you hear like nagatem so, ganoem so. Yeah, sagiso. I guess you could say that. But again, it's the cool part is that it changes the word. And so you can do this with you can do this if you take a look at that reflexive or that reciprocal, those 2, the one that means like each other or yourself, and you can use those in lots of places when you have a verb that involves more than one person. So let me think of another example. Boy, now I'm scratching my brain. I'm like, what's a good example here? Well, I'm thinking of that. I'll check my comments and see if I missed anything. By the way, if you have any questions about any of this, I'm trying not to use all of the linguistic terms and stuff. So I hope it's not, like, I'm trying to make it less complicated because there's a lot of, because it gets complicated. What's a good example? Wapam. So let's use that one. So here's another example. Okay, wapam. So you could say, if you said wapmeo, okay, wapmeo, that person sees somebody. And again, this breaks down the I don't even know what this part, I know this M, like the boundaries are probably like here. I don't study morphology in the same way that like linguistics do maybe. But I do know this is the part, if you look at this here, like if you look at the chart that we studied last week, this one, and you look at that, the part that has EW on the end, that's the third, that means that person sees that other person sees that other person. So that literally means that person sees that other person. And so that ending part is the part you can take off, that EW, long EW. And then you can say, so you can put that ITO there. Wapam to. But you wouldn't say, again, by virtue of having that ito there is like, okay, VI? Yeah, Cree Literacy Network. If you Google Cree Literacy Network decoder ring, it's on that page. Cree Literacy Network decoder ring, it'll show up there. It's the summary paradigm tables. There's a video in my, where is it? Did I do this on TikTok? If you go to my YouTube, I do a video too. I explain how to use that chart because there's a lot there. So, okay. So you wouldn't necessarily say wapamto, you'd say wapamtoak, because the ito part sort of implies more than one person. So if you said wapamtoak, they saw each other. They saw each other. Wapamtoak. You could say, and then you could do the same with iso. You could say wapamso. Wapamso, that one saw themselves. Wapamso. Or you could say wapamsoak, they saw themselves. You could say that too. So just that idea of that, like that ito or that iso. If you have a transitive, like that VTA, that verb that involves two people, two animate things, some of them won't make sense, like, I don't know. I guess you could say no, I won't say that. I'll get banned from TikTok. Pick something clean. What else? Saw each other. Yeah, kiski male, there's a good one. So again, this is this one here, that's what they call that VTA, that verb that involves two animate things. That one saw that other one. But this one is now, they call that sort of like a detransitivized, I guess. I don't know what you call that. But now this verb changes. It changes into this. And the reason that's, and as it pertains to our chart, if we go back to our chart, if it's one of these, that transitive VTA, that's this big purple and orange chart up at the top, or blue and orange, whatever color that is. But if it's a VAI, that changes. That means that we use this chart down in the bottom, the light blue in here. Right? So because the different verb types conjugate differently, so you use a different chart if you're studying things that way. And you don't have to do it that way, but if you're studying that chart, that's what that is. Let's do one more of these. So the verb, the transitive verb would be, we'll say giskemeo. Giskemeo. That one knows that other person. That one knows that other person. That'd be this person knows that person, that other person. So then giskemeo. So then you could do the same thing. That's your sort of boundary for that final right there. So then what you can do is you can put ito or iso. Giskemito. But again, it sort of implies, when you listen to fluid speakers, a fluid speaker will say giskemtot, like they'll say it when they're telling about a concept or talking about, the way something should be or whatever. you can say it that way, but generally speaking, you will have to pluralize this to make sense. Because just by virtue of having ito in there, you're sort of implying that there's more than one person. And again, that changes that type of word. Giskemtawak, they know each other, I guess you would say. Giskemtawak. And then the same, you can do that with also isso. Giskeim miso. Giskemso. That one knows themselves. That one knows themselves. Now, this is going to, let's talk about, I don't know what the word for this is. I was going to pick another word. Miskoil. So this is VTA. This one doesn't have a clean, like, hard consonant at that boundary where I don't know what they call that. This is the final, but like that conjugation is right there. You could say giskeim, right where that command is. That M, that's where the root or the stem or whatever you call that ends, right? Giskeim, you're saying no, that one. But this one, miskoil, the thing that makes this interesting is that if you add ITO or ISO in there, you end up with something really interesting, because that boundary is right here. And we've got short AW at that morpheme boundary. Misko. You're saying like find that one. You're not saying go and find. Go and find, it'd be like nitono. But like you wouldn't, I don't think you would use this as a command, misko, because you're saying misko, that person found that other person. But something interesting happens when you add ito in there and change that verb type. If we just say misko and then we add ito in there, something happens right here with that short AW and I. They collapse into a new sound. It's just the way it works. And it doesn't always happen, but it happens often enough that you need to know about it. So that short AWI turns into a long A in this particular instance. So you'd say miskatoak. So miskoil, that person finds someone. You can't say miskoito, miskotowak. You'd say miskatowak. That's just the way it is. They find each other. Miskatowak. And this happens often enough that it's just good to know that that's a thing. Because it happens, it happens quite a bit. And again, not always. There's some exceptions to when that happens. It's not just if you see like short AWI together that they're going to do that every single time, because they don't. But they do it often enough that you just need to be aware of it. And it's not that those letters are doing anything specific. It's that the sound of the word changes when you say it this way. When you say those together, it's just the sound of the word changes for whatever reason. I'm sure there's like a linguist or somebody might know if there's like a reason for that. It's just kind of the way it is. And then the same thing's going to happen if you use isso. So we can say, same thing if we have misko and then we say isso, like to find yourself. Then you're going to say miskaso. Miskaso, that one found themselves. Oh, sorry. Miskaso, that one found themselves. Miskaso, and I found myself. Miskaso, no, we found ourselves, all of us. So that's something interesting that you can do. The reason I'm showing you these is because once you, it like opens up free words. Like if you learn a word, right? You learn a word like, I don't know, kisagietin, and then you're like, oh, where does sagietin come from? And you're like, oh, it comes from this word, sagiheo. And then you know that this is this type of word, and that you can put that ito and isso in there, then you get 2 more words for free. It's like you don't have to learn a whole new word. You get like extra words just by learning a little bit, right? Let's think of another. So then there's some more stuff that we can do with that. Let me just check my comments because I'm pretty sure I missed some. Sorry if I missed your comments. Where'd you get the chart? I think we answered that. Louise is going to bed. TikTok is distracting. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. So let's do this one. This is, these are more like morphemes that are present in, usually in a specific type of verb. So these generally, this shouldn't be I was going to say mo, not mo. These all have very similar endings. Amo, sto, stum, and stamaw. They generally mean, depending on the word, like for the benefit of somebody, usually for someone, or for their benefit. So we'll talk about these for a minute, and then I'll come up with an example of each of these and sort of how they're used and how they can change a word. Now, when we used these ones that eso and ito, we took and we transformed verbs from this sort of like involving two people to like involving one person kind of thing. These do the opposite. They will take something and transitivize it generally. So let's actually talk about stamaw. Let's start with that one. So we can say, let's go over here, make a line to demarcate a new topic. So we're going to work on this one, stamaw, which pretty much means like for their benefit. And an example of this would be like, if we say this word, you probably know this word, atsimo. If somebody says atsimo, what are they saying? Right? Inevitably, if I go visiting somewhere, especially somewhere where they they know that I can use the language a little bit, inevitably somebody will lean over at some point in time and this word will come out of their mouth. It happens every time. They'll say atsimo. It's sort of like, it's like tell a story maybe. It doesn't have to be a story. It can just be like recounting something. Like it could be something that happened recently. Like you could think of it as like news. Maybe not gossip specifically, but atsimo is sort of like, it's like, yeah, tell us a story, I guess. So if I say this now, and actually like, but before we do stamaw, let's do this one, stow. Let's do stow, because you hear this one already. You've heard it. If you've, this one, stow, which is sort of like to or for someone. These are very similar, and again, depending on the word, this isn't a hard and fast rule. It really depends on the word. They're very, very similar, but they can be slightly different. So in this particular case, we'll take this word atsimo, and we'll say atsimo sto. Atsimo sto. Okay? And I won't say it this way. I mean, you could say it this way specifically. So again, this is a verb that only involves one person. They call that a VAI. Just involves one person. And now we've turned it into a verb that involves two people, because it's now transitive. And you're saying, atsimo sto, you're saying, tell that one a story. And where you've heard this is, that Brian McDonald song. Atimostawin, mate atimostawin. That's that word. Atimostawin. Tell me a story. So you can use this. Atimostawin. Tell me a story. Atimostawin. So what we've done is we've taken that atimo, which is again just like maybe tell a story, I guess, or whatever, and we've added this onto the n, staw. I say staw. The way I hear this in some communities is staw, like that short A is more like in about, staw, atimo, atimo, staw. But the way I hear it is just staw. Atimostawin. Tell me a story. And I asked one of my teachers, Ruben Quinn, one time, I'm like, what's the difference between atimostawin and atimostamawin? Because these are very similar. Atimostawin, atimostamawin. What would be the difference between that one? And he said, this would be like, tell me a story. And this one here, atimostamawin, and again, this might be different in different areas. Would be like, tell a story, but it's my story. Atimostamawin, like tell my story for me. Tell this story for me or on my behalf. I guess you'd say, tell this story on my behalf. Maybe that. But again, it might be a little bit different depending where you go. Because you see all four of these different ones, like mo, sto, stum, and stamaw. And depending on the word, they can have a little bit different meaning. Like they're mostly mean the same thing. But then you'll have some where it's like, trying to think of a good example where you'll see two forms of a word in the dictionary, and one is something with stow and one is with stamaw, and they have the same meaning. So again, I think it really depends, or maybe just that the meaning is so subtle that it's like it just eludes my kind of my learner brain a little bit. Translations are hard anyway, so we can't always just trust the dictionary. We have to like hear words used in context to understand more what they mean. Okay. Stum, stow. With the exception of this one, I can't even think of an example of just plain old stum off the top of my head. Stum. Because this would be a VTI, this one here. But we won't talk about that today. Amo, stow, and stamo. Oh, and then there was another one that I wanted to show you. And that is ege. And that's going to do the exact same thing as these ones do, in that they're going to take and change a transitive word back into an intransitive word. So here's an example. We're going to use that same. Okay, this is going to be a little mind-bendy, so just stay with me, okay? We're going to take that atimosto. That one tells a story to someone else or for someone else, okay? And we're going to add ege on the end. So I'm going to break it down. We'll add all the little pieces. So we've got atimo. And then we got staw. And then we got ege. Okay. So what that means, this is sort of like that ege means like in general. That's the best way I can think of that. Generally or in general. And again, it detransitivizes. So we've taken this word, atimo, as a verb involving one person. We've changed it into a verb involving two people, VTA, atimosto. And now we're going to take and change it back into a verb involving one person again with this ige on the end. And this is going to mean in general, so I don't know, you could probably look this word up. Tsimo. Again, we talked about that. Short AWI is going to turn into a long A. Tsmostage. Tsmostage, which means, I don't, it could mean like they tell stories for people. Tsmostage. I know there's like you can say, here's another one. I don't know if you can find this word in the dictionary, but you can definitely find, so this word here means to speak, big squirrel, big squirrel, okay, big squirrel. That one speaks. And then we're going to borrow the stamaw again. So we're going to turn that into biggest stamaw. Stamaw. Again, we borrowed that one. We just talked about this one right here, stamaw. Big squay stamaw. That one speaks for someone or on their behalf or for their benefit. And then if you say biggest squay stum, but we're going to add ege on the end, stamageo. This one's very specific. That's back to that VTA. And this one is that VAI. That one speaks for people in general. Big squay stamageo. And then we'll do one more. And I don't remember the exact translation of this. Big squay stamageo. Has anybody ever heard that word before? Big squay stamageo. Big squay stamageo. Now look at what we've done with that. We took big squirrel, which just means to speak. That one speaks, big squirrel. We put that stamaw in there. Big squay stamaw. That one speaks. I think you would say, you know, that one speaks on that other person's behalf, or that one speaks for that other person. Would you say if we look this up, there's probably a bunch of definitions for this. Actually, we can do that in a minute. And then big squay stamageo, it's sort of like the same as this one, but more in general. That one speaks for others, maybe you could say. And then this one, big squay stamageo, when you put that O on the front, I think it becomes like a title or a role. And then I guess you would say, I don't know, that wouldn't be lawyer, would it? Or interpreter or something like that. Big squay stamageo, like the one who speaks on behalf of others. We should look it up. I don't have my iPad with me just this exact second, and my laptop's closed. If you'll stand by for 5 seconds, I'll grab my iPad and we'll look it up. Tisqua. Okay. Tisqua. iPad's charged for a change. That's nice. Okay, we'll go on now. Just gotta get in here. Come on. Go on. And we'll look this up here. I'll say opigisquistamageo. What comes up when we do that? Spokesperson. Yeah. Spokesperson, lawyer, counselor, orator, whatever that means. One who speaks on behalf of others, someone who speaks for others, spokesperson or counselor. If we take the O off the front, then it sort of means the same thing. Can I take that off? Just big squay stamageo. That one speaks for others, speaks on the other's behalf. And then if we add stamaw, then it's very specific. Then it's that transitive one. That person speaks for someone, speaks on their behalf. So we're sort of Yeah, lawyer. Well, I was like, there's got to be other definitions for that, right? O pigsquay stamaw. Like, I was pretty sure lawyer, but, you know, wonder if there's other interpretations of that. Yeah, Dancy Neil. So, by the way, if you're not following, can you be followed on TikTok? Neil Red Crow. Neil teaches a class a couple times a week through, what is it? Atsumo Paspu. Neil, what's the society called again, Neil? Neil teaches a couple of times a week. And I learned this stuff off of Neil years ago that I'm sharing with you tonight. So if you're not in Neil's class, you should be. All right, what did we cover? So we covered the reciprocal, reflexive. We talked about some of these. I just wanted to introduce these because as you run into these, it's like getting words for free. It's like if you understand a little bit of how they work and you know a couple words and you can start putting some of these on and you get all those words for free. Like, again, let's pick on the one that we'll just make up a word. We'll use ito and we'll use iso, again, doing the word we just worked on, this one here. And I'm going to make this up, but if you said this, you would probably be understood. I'm going to use pigsquay stamaw. This word might not make any sense, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to put ito in there. Pigsquay stam. Now again, if we have that short AW and I at that, what they call that morpheme boundary, becomes a long A. Ato. And then again, this is going to be wak. I don't know when you would say this. Pigsquay stamatawak. They spoke for each other. They spoke on each other's behalf. I'm not sure when you would use that, but you could. You could say that, right? So we've used both of those now. We've used that stamaw. We've used it with ige. We've used it with ito. So now we'll use it with iso. Just because we can. It might not totally make sense in every context. Pigsquay stum. And again, we've got that short AW and the I at that boundary. We need to make it a long A. And you could say this, pigsquay stamaw. So that one spoke for themselves. Pigsquay stamaw. Or you could say that as a command. Pigsquay stamaw. Speak for yourself. Pigsquay stamaw. So we've used a couple of those. Because again, remember, this is stamaw and iso. That short AWI at that, what they call that, a morpheme boundary, where those two morphemes are just units of meaning, right? So that stamaw means for the benefit of someone else, and then this means myself. Reflective, like for myself. Pigsquay stamaw, so that one spoke for themselves. Oh, is there any others? Is there any other easy ones? I feel like we covered a lot in the, I don't know, I haven't even been live that long. Ige, ito, iso. What's another? Is there any other good ones? Oh, I want to show you this one. This is a good one. This is another good one. Yeah, because you hear this a lot. Okay. Ego. You don't hear it like that. You hear it in context, but this morpheme means you can't even describe it on its own. The way you would describe this is like it happened. Like just sort of like it happened. But again, this is another, what they call a detransitivizer. It happened to, and then the person to the person. I can't use X because that would be grammatically incorrect. And you would insert pronoun. And I'll give you an example of this. Okay, it happened or it's happening. You could say it that way. Question Darian says, what does danse translate to in English, like greetings? If you hung around for 3 minutes, would you hang around for 3 minutes? And I'll answer that question because it's actually, there's a bit to it. Darian, if you're not in a hurry, let me just finish this one thought and then I'll come right back to that question. So this one here, igawe, a good example of this is let's use that same word. Big squeeze stamaw. But this one only works for me and you for the most part. But I'll give you an example. So if I say, let me write this out. Big squeeze stamaw. That one speaks on behalf of someone else. Big squeeze stamaw. Okay. I can only use this form, this igawe, if it's me or you or us or y'all, never for that other person. So this works when it's like me, you, us, all of us, all of y'all, any of these scenarios, but it doesn't work for the third person. So what we can say is, if I say, what do I say? That person spoke for me. I would say ne, because it's my pronoun, ne. We're getting into biggest square stum. Now we're going to get back into that place where we've got AW and I again, because I need to put ik on the end. So this is going to be nipig square stamag. Just ignore this for now. We'll come back to this another time. Nipig square stamag. Okay, that person spoke on my behalf or for my benefit. But that's being specific. That's this person spoke for me. Okay, this person spoke for me. But if I use this instead, if I put that in there, stamaw, go in. Again, that short AW and that I right at that morpheme boundary is going to become that long A right there. Nipig square stamagoin. And this would mean like, how would you interpret that? It would be like I was spoken for, but like somebody spoke on my behalf. Somebody, someone, in general, that's why they use this marker called X. Someone spoke on my behalf, or my behalf was spoken for. This is a hard one to interpret. I don't know, how do you say that? Let me use a better example because we picked a really hard word. Let's pick on this one. If I say nisagihik, okay, that one loves me. Nisagihik. Sorry, I'm writing fast and I'm making a mess. Nisagihik. That one loves me. Nisagihik. That's what that means. That person loves me. But if I say, we're going to use this igawe again, okay? Ne sage higawin. Nisage higawin. I am loved. That's what that means. Nisage higawin. I am loved. We're not being specific. If I say nisage hik nimosum. Mushum love, my grandpa loves me. Nisage hik nimosum. Nisage hik nuokum. My grandma loves me. Right? We're being real specific. Nuokum nisage hik. Nimosum nisage hik. Or I could say my parents nisage guak. Ninigiguak. My parents love me. Nisage guak. If you put that pluralizes it. That guak on the end, that would make this a plural. Nisagigwak. They love me. But we're being specific. Ninigigwak, you would have to say who for the most part. But this one, Nisagi Higoin. There's that Igowi. Nisagi Higoin. Now it's, they call this X-actor. And what it does is it did that same thing before that we talked about, where this is that verb. It involves two people. They call that a VTA or whatever. And it does this again. It detransitivizes that verb. Changes it into a non-transitive in terms of the way that you conjugate it. So I can say, if we can, going back to our chart that we talked about, then I can take that sagego. Again, it doesn't work for the third person. Anything with a 3, it doesn't work for. But anything with a 2 or a 1, so I can say, Nisagehigoin, Kisagehigoin, Nisagehigoinan, Kisagehigono. We are loved, all of us. Kisa-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. All of y'all are loved. And then the conjunct as well. Isagehigoyan, Isagehigoyan, Isagehigoyak, Isagehigoyak. Again, Isagehigoyek. That one's got special rules. There are any other ones? These are the main ones, I think. These are kind of the main ones. Oh, yes, the chart. So if you Google, let's do it together. Open my iPad. Come on, iPad. Open up. Okay, so if we go Cree Literacy Network, probably even just Cree Literacy, decoder ring. It's just what Arden called it. There it is right there. Summary. So if you Google Cree Literacy Network decoder ring, and then this one will pop up. Summary paradigm tables, the decoder ring of Cree. If you click on that, and then this will come up. And then if you go down, and there it is. There's one in Y dialect and one in TH. This was created by Ben Godden. We tease Ben endlessly. I have a video on YouTube on how to read this because there's 4 different charts on here. There's 4 different charts. So there's a verb on the verb. There's the videos on my YouTube. You should start with Tisqua. I'll pull them up. Tisqua. Just stare at that page for a second while I pull up my YouTube. Tisqua. Videos. How do I get to my videos? Your videos. Okay, so if you go to my YouTube, you can find the link to my YouTube in my, well, you can't see most of these because these are on my sort by. Can I sort by? Shorts, lives, videos. Tisqua. Okay, so there's a couple right here. So this one here, animacy and verb types. If you're not familiar with your different types of verbs, I would start with that one. Animacy and verb types, because when you get into this chart, none of this is going to make any sense if you don't understand your different verb types. And then once you're done that one, then you can watch this one, the VTA verb conjugation in Plains Cree, and I will explain. This will be like a review of the pronouns, so you know what 1S, 2S, 2-1, 1P, 3P, 3S. You know what all of those mean when you go through this video. And then by the end of the video, and it's a little bit long, but by the time you get to the end, you will know how to use all of these charts. Okay? If that works for you. You don't have to study that way, but if it works for you, the way I study is I want to get all the hard stuff out of the way. So I just dove into the grammar and did grammar study and kind of just learned it and tried to get it out of the way. Joke's on me, I'm still learning it, but if you want to be able to speak the language, do you want to do a little bit of work on a story and work through a story and talk about why the grammar is important? We could do that together right now. If you give me a second, I'll just get my laptop loaded up and we'll go through a story a little bit together. Live on TikTok, Sunday night. Go through Tisqua. Okay, so we'll get a Google Doc going here. I try to do this in a way on my phone that's easy to see, but it's kind of how's that? And fix that. Hope that's all still good. Okay. So what we're going to do is put that out of the way, and we'll get a Google Doc going. We'll grab a story, let's grab a story off Cree Literacy Network. Let's pick one that's not a sacred story so I don't get in trouble. I get yelled at. So we'll go to read and listen in Cree, Atsmuna. And then let's do Cree Stories of the Horse and Buffalo. Okay, we'll do this one here. Just go try and get it so you can see it good. Zoom in a bit. Try and pick one that... I see lots of pictures. Where's the Cree part, Arden? Oh, it's way down at the bottom. Here we go. Okay. Draft text. Zoom in a bit. So what we're going to do is... we're going to go together. We're going to go through this story. This is a kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. Miyitonâwâw. I don't know this word. Kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. You will pass them on to one another. Yeah, you see right there? You see that ito right there? That was what I was just talking. We were just talking about that. There's that ito we were just talking about today. We just ran into it. Let me see if I can download this and open it in. That might be easier if we can just get this open in a PDF reader. Not there. And then what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll break down. We'll go through and find all of these words. We'll look at the grammar and why you need to know all of those bits. Hey. So there we are. So if you know that ito, if you know that that's that reflexive, okay. Oh, you know I wanted to do this in the browser? Yeah. I wanted to do this in the browser because I'm going to open it on Google Docs. We're going to get a Google Doc going so we can do some analysis on this. So we'll say... We'll call this Nihioiwin, new doc. We'll call this Nihioiwin, May 25. Excuse me. Bump that up a bit. Don't need that. Okay, I think we're okay here. So now let's just analyze this very first word. Let's break this down. Okay. I don't know if I can copy this. I'll just type it out. So it's going to be ayaso, not ayasu, ayaso-miyitonâwâw. So the question is, where does this exist? How do we figure out what this is? Like, what does this word mean? So the first thing we want to do is break it down. Let's bump up the text a little bit. There, it's a little bit easier to read. Hopefully that's not too bad. We want to figure out, what does this mean? If we start to pull the pieces apart, if we start to break down like what these parts mean, then we can get back to, I didn't recognize the word at first, but now I do, because I'm like, oh, that's where that word comes from. So if we break it down, ga, that's a preverb. Ayaso is another, sorry, this is the tense marker, I guess you could say. Ayaso, we'll look that up in a minute. And then we got mi, ito, nawâw. This part here, if we can color change these, how do I do that? Oh, I gotta do my puzzle. Tisqua. Gotta prove I'm not a robot. Do I pass? Yes, okay. So can I change the background color? We'll go like yellow, and this one, it's the same yellow color. So this ge, at the beginning, and the wow, that means all. That's the final derivation, I guess, or whatever, the conjugation. This ito is the reflexive. So that's the thing we just talked about. This part here means each other. And then we know, since we're putting the reflective on there, we know that this is a VTA, this verb. It has to be. It has to be a VTA. Otherwise, we couldn't put the reflexive on it. So this one here is the VTA, and what that is from is mieo, which is to give some. That one gives someone, gives it to someone, I guess you could say. We can look that up. Mieo, gives them something, imposes on something, offers them something, grants them something. Basically, it's the way I understand this word. That one gives something to someone else. So we break that down. So the most basic version of this word would be ge, mi, and then we've got ito, which means each other, ito. So now we've turned it back into a VAI by using that reflexive. Miyitonâwâw. What if we look at this word now, which sort of like y'all give it to each other? You exchange it back and forth, I guess you could say. Let's go see what this means here. Oh yeah, so a little here and there. That's cool. That's a cool preverb. Ah yeah, so a little bit. So this is like y'all, you, bit by bit, give it to each other. And then the ending, wow, that means y'all, all of y'all. All of y'all. You all give it back, you all give it to each other bit by bit. How did they say that was? You will pass them on to one another. Oh, and then there was ga, which means will. So this is like you're going to, the ga part. So there, we broke down one word. There's a lot in there. This is how the language gets really complex, right? But again, if we start just with where we were, that ito is in there. So then that led to the hint that, oh, okay, miyitonâwâw, you give it to each other. Then we went and figured out what that means. And that's what all the pieces of that word means. Let's do another one. Next one. Yes, thank you. Let me have a little bit of that before you go. Thank you. My water delivery. I said to my son, come in an hour and fill up my water because I'll need it. Okay, let's do another one. By the way, if you have any questions, if there's any of that doesn't make sense, or if I'm going too fast, if there's anything in there that you want to dive into a little bit deeper, okay, let's go a little bit more. Just looks like I got just feedback at this point, so we'll just keep going. Okay, so, oh, you know what? Somebody asked, what does tanse mean? That was, I said, stick around for 3 minutes and I'll talk about it. And then I didn't. Darian. I don't know if Darian's still here. Let's talk about tanse. There it is right there. Tanse. There's actually a couple morphemes in here. So let's go back to Darian's question. Okay, and the question was, what does tanse translate to in English? Okay, so we use this as kind of as a greeting. I hope you're still here, Darian. If you're not, we'll talk about it anyway. Tanse, there's actually two parts to this. So today we kind of use this as a greeting to mean like hello. That's not really what it means, though we use it that way. There's even some areas that the young folks are just saying tan. They don't even say the isse anymore. And I see this spelled tanse. I see it spelled tanse. Like this. But in SRO, we spell it this way. And there's a reason because of that. because there's actually two what they call morphemes in here. There's two units of meaning in this word. The tan part, which is like a question of some kind, and then the isse part, isse, which sort of means thus or the way of something. So when you examine this word, tanesse, what it really means, tanesse is a question. It really means how. And so when you say tanse, what you're asking is, you're implying, how are you? And we've come to sort of use that to mean hello. So if you see two people, they meet each other, one person will say, tanse. And then the other person will be like, oh, tanse. Okay. But what they're doing is they're saying, how are you doing? And the other person's saying, how are you doing? These are actually questions. And so if you listen to the old people, tanse, usually they'll say tansegia. But if they say tanse, then you can answer them monanto, moi, or namoya, nanto, which is sort of like there's nothing, like fine, like I'm fine, or there's nothing wrong. But when somebody says tanse, what they're saying is, how are you? And some of the ways that you'll hear this, tanse egua, which is sort of like, how are you now? Or how are things now? Okay. How are you now? How are things now? Tanse, oops. Atawia, it's another way to hear this, which I understand to mean sort of like, how are things anyway? How are things anyway? Tanse tawia. How are the... And this breaks down to that atawia, which comes from atta and wiya. And this means, atta is like although, or sort of like, would you say despite? Although, atta. Atta, although. Atawia, am I putting the marker on that wrong? The wrong, oh, it is too, yeah. Atawia, I got the wrong one. Tanse atawia. Atta, which is like although. Let's go back to atta. On the other hand, even though, something like that. Although, even though. And wiya, which means like that one or that thing. So the way I interpret this, tanse tawia is like, how are you doing in spite of everything? But we sort of interpret it as like, how are you anyway? Tisqua, I got a couple questions here. One was, can I inbox you to make sure my introduction for my Unigrabs speech is correct? Sure, send me an inbox, I'll do my best. Just DM me on TikTok. Tyra says, is there a more literal way to say hello? There's no word for hello in the language. You could say like, how, which means okay. It's like an acknowledgement. If you're acknowledging something. How. But I don't know, I don't hear people really greet each other like that. It's like there's that stereotypical like TV like how, but like we don't really say that. We say how, which is like okay. But I don't know of a word for like hello. That we don't really have a word for hello. Like we sort of use tanse to mean hello, but that's not what it means. It means how. How are you? Yeah, a ho is like a stereotype. It's like a Hollywood movie stuff, right? And even I see like on TikTok, like all these folks at the end of their videos are saying ho, but I sort of wonder if that's the same as this word how, which like we say how, which is like okay. Like if you're gonna get up and walk away, you can say that. You can be like how. Oh yeah, you walk away. You're saying okay, like okay then I guess. I don't know. Are you native? I am Métis. I'm a Red River Métis. I don't look Métis. You look like a white guy. But I'm mate, Cree-speaking matey, I guess you could say. I think we answered the question what danse means. Darian. Oh yeah, Darian's still here, right on. Yeah, Neil makes a good point, because hello is like a new word in English. Wasn't that the person, was it Edison or somebody was trying to come up with it? Because I saw that too. Was it on TikTok or YouTube or something? They wanted people to say something when they picked up the phone, so then they started saying hello. But hello meant something else before that, didn't it? Or something like that? What's the etymology of hello? It was originally first recorded in the 1800s. It was used to attract attention or express surprise. Well, hello, what do you have there? But the true break to this word was when, employed in the service of brand new technology, the telephone, Thomas Edison himself claimed to have initiated the use of hello upon receiving a phone call. Yeah, interesting. So anyway, in the language, we just say, if you want to acknowledge somebody, you can say, if you want to greet somebody, I don't hear it this way. You could say this, kitatam miskatin, kitatam skatin, you could say this. I don't hear it this way. It's like I greet you, maybe like I acknowledge you. But the way I hear this usually is to a group. This, for me, is a little bit more of a formal greeting. I hear kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. I acknowledge all of you. I greet all of you. This is sort of the way. You could say this to one person, I guess. It feels kind of formal to me. Like, I don't know if you'd ever, I don't know, maybe Neil would say. Yeah, Neil says, yeah, you could say it to one person as well. It feels awkward to me, but again, I'm a learner. I've never heard a fluent speaker just say that to one person. Yeah, okay. Neil says, that's the test. That's the litmus test, eh? If you've heard an elder say it, as soon as you've heard an elder say something, then it's like, okay, I can say that. And then you move on. But Neil, I've only ever heard it this way. Kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. That's the way I hear that. Kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw. Neil, when you heard that from one elder to another, was it just like in plain greeting, like two folks, they meet each other for the first time? And usually this past word, Billy says, usually it is sweat. Darian asks, isn't Red River OG Cree mostly though? Red River, there's three largely recognized dialects of Michif. They call that Michif. One is Northern Michif, which is mostly Plains Cree, or mostly Cree. Was at the start of an interview. Interesting. So three dialects of Michif. Northern Michif, which is mostly Cree. Southern or Heritage Michif, which is a mix, like it's really quite a mix. And then there's French Michif, which is mostly French. I think there's probably other dialects in there too. Okay, let's get back to, we have only got one word into this story. Let's go on to the next one here. Okay, so we were talking about why is the conjugation important? So let's just read this first part and then we'll start breaking this down a bit. Danse wow tagawi pigsquehaya myron paskemin no tawi keteaya ikakwitsimaya kawitamagoyak ayatsimuen anehini sopamois muniaso tagagi tagotit hexanma kiaigwa. So what what they're saying here is danse, this one here, the one that's gonna the one that we're speaking to, a pigsquehayak myron paskemin, my father no tawi keteaya, he's a elder, I guess you'd say. We're asking him kawitamagoyak to tell us about some stories. Anhini sopam, these two stories, pamoyes munias o gagi tagote, before the white man arrived. Hexan makiegwe said, okay, that's it. Now it's your turn. You can go now, I guess you'd say that. But let's break this down because there's a whole bunch of kipaha. there's a whole bunch of grammar in here, right? So if we look at this first one, gawi pigsquehaya, that's interesting because this causative H is right there. So pigsqueheo, let's go look at that word. The one we're making speak, I guess you would say. Pigsqueheo. Yeah, to make someone speak, get someone to speak, or to interview someone. The one that we are interviewing, I guess you'd say. Oh, wrong tab. The one that, gawi, the one that we're going to interview. Myron Pus came in, my father. But let's look at this word, pigsquehaya. So we need to, when we look at that, we want to know two things. We understand pigsque is in there. So we know like kind of that means speak, right? And then haya, this part is like us to that one. But how would we know that? If somebody told us, I guess, but we can go back and find that. I'm not going to go find it on the chart because we can do that another time. But this is the word, gawi. I think it was a short A. Nope, long A. Pigsquehaya. Gawi pigsquehaya. So if we work backwards from this, well, we know pigsque is kind of like the root word, I guess, the stem, I guess you could say. And then we can take the gawi has its own meaning if we just take this in the conjunct form, a pigsquehaya. Then we know that this aya part is its own ending, its own conjugation. And what that means is us to that one. So that's going to be us to that one, singular. So we are, I guess you could think of it as like we are causing, us plural, we are causing that person to speak, or us plural, we are interviewing that person. So, and knowing that this is going to be a transitive word, it's going to come from, so you could say this, pigsque, you'd have to aspirate it. Pigsque, with that aspiration on the end. That would be a command. That would be like, interview that one, or make that one talk, I guess you could say that. If you know that, then you know that that would come from this word, pigsqueheo, which means that one interviews them, that other one, or maybe that one makes that other one talk, speak, I guess you could say, something like that. So then you could say pigsquehik, make them talk. So once you get into this, once you know that this is the root, pigsqueheo, actually pigsqueheo is this is the root or the lemma, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, when you get into that chart that we talked about, that's this one right here, pigsqueheo. Pigsqueheo, that one makes that other one talk. We look at this one back in the story, ka pigsquehaya. Okay, we take a minute. Let me just pull this chart up on Cree Literacy Network. Cree Literacy Decoder Ring. We'll get in there. We'll just do this. You asked for it, now we're in there. There's the chart. So we can go look at this. Pigsquehaya. So that is right there. Oh, and it is a long A. Look at that. It's totally a long A. Pigsquehaya. This one right here. It's right here. Okay. A pigsquehaya in the conjunct, and that means us plural. We are to that one singular. That's what that means. If it was plural, we would add these together, a pigsquehaya, but it's not, it's just singular. So this is the singular column, this is the plural. If you're confused about this chart, that's okay. I have a video on this on my YouTube, go check it out. We're going to keep going. So that's that one, gawi pigsquehaya, the one that we will be interviewing. So let's go on to the next one. Gawit big squehaya. So that's that. So we've learned one conjugation right there. Myron paske min no tawi, my dad. Geteaya, an elder. Here's that same conjugation right here. E kakweitsimaya. So let's do that one. We'll break it down the same. Long A. And I guess you could say we are asking this one. I guess you could say that. We are questioning this one. It's going to come from, again, there's your stem is right there. Kakweitsim, you can say this as a command. Kakweitsim, ask this one. Ask them. Just the one person. Ask them, singular. And that's going to come from this word. Kakweitsimeo. The reason I write out this third person form, that one asks that other one, and I put it in yellow. I'll do that background in yellow again. Yellow. These ones in yellow are the ones that you, when you go to the dictionary, that's the one you see this, even if I type in kakweitsim, kakweitsimeo is going to come up. See right there. Because in the dictionary for Plains Cree, in Plains Cree, they put the third person form in the dictionary. They have a fancy word for it. It's called the lemma. It's just the dictionary form. So if you have the dictionaries and you look in the dictionary, like the Eric Wollengray dictionaries, this is the form that you'll see when you're looking up a word. You'll see that third person form. And if we click into that and we look at it, change these to the numbered labels, and we zoom in on this a little bit, okay? And there's that, three person, third, now I gotta go down more. Frustrating, where is it? Third person, did I pass it? 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, there it is right there, this one here. Kakweitsimeo. That's the dictionary form. So, and if you look at this page, if I zoom back in a little bit, you can see there's a lot of these, right? Like, look how many of these there are. All the different forms for all the different people. Took me probably 2 years to get, like, to kind of, again, using this chart, like studying this chart specifically. You don't have to learn it this way. I'm not saying you have to. For me, I wanted to know, so I started studying it. I'm like, I want to know all of these. And then you go through and you look at these stories, right? So when you see this word, ikakweitsimaya, then you know what that means. We are asking that one. Okay, let's do this next one. Gawitamagi. Oh, and one thing I didn't talk about, back up a little bit. This ga here, kind of like ga, the one who, or that which, you could think of it that way. And then we is going to, you could think of it that way, or maybe intends to, you could think of it like that. Just why I got some questions here. Sorry, let me back up. Mixu says a language of mostly French shouldn't be considered native. I think you'd have a hard time convincing all of the Métis who speak French, Mitchif, because when you meet them, they look pretty native. Just that's the language they grew up with. So it's hard to tell them, hey, that's not a native language. Louis Riel was a hero. Funny story. I got a great uncle, or had a great uncle. I don't know if he's alive. I don't think he is. I had a great uncle named Louis Riel Caplet. He was born in, he would have been born about 30 years after the resistance. 20 to 30 years. I don't actually know his exact birthday. Kaltine Simmer. Dance speel med TikTok Cree lesson checks. Dance beat the way. Tyre says, if Geteai is elder, would the plural be Geteayak? That way, Geteayak, you would say that for elders. Geteayak. That's one way I hear that. Tyra, how often you go live? I try to go live on Sunday nights. Mana. I try to go about 6 o'clock Pacific. I got started a little bit late tonight, so we're going to run a little bit late. Forsaken says, I lost my kokum 4 years ago and the language died with their hurts my heart. It's not too late. You can still pick it up. You can still pick it up. Nistaya moin no peaso na maga na naya ne hiu and pamoisi nagata skate no kumpan. My grandma didn't pass the language on to us before she died either, but we still got time to pick it up. What about for sure in Woodland Cree? I'd say tapwi. So in I would say in Y dialect we say tapwi. In Woodland, the TH. Excuse me. So I'd say tapwi, which is like truly. You could say that for like for sure. Tapwi. Woodland, they just accent is a little bit different. I think they'd probably say tapwi. That's going to sound more like a long I at the end. Tapwi. I think that's the way you'd say that. But it means the same thing. It's like for sure, truly. Tapwi. So another way you could say that, for sure. There's another word on the tip of my brain. I can't think of it. Neil would know lots of words. Neil would know other words for that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we were just talking about this one. We just talked about this today a little bit. Gawitamagoya. Okay, what does that mean? By the way, these are all VT. These are all transitive, right? These are all VTA, transitive verbs. So we kind of need to know, right? This one too, VTA. This one too, VTA. Talking about more than one person, right? So this one also is going to be VTA. Ga. Long I, Vitamagoya. This means like to. The ga means like to. Going to. You could think of it that way. Going to. And then, so how do we break this down? So witam is going to be the stem. And that's actually not even just witam. It's this. There's a lot of change happening in this. There's a bit of change because this comes from the word witamow. Witamo. So because there's a long A, the hint is in that long A right there. That long A. So what's happening in there is that there's a boundary there, and then there's witamo, and then there's ikko, and then there's yak. That's what's happening there. That ikko is sort of like inversing it. So what this means is this is going to tell us, and it's implied, this one is going to tell us, or to tell us. We asked him to tell us. So the direction of this one is this one. You could think of it as the inverse. So us is going to be this, and then the inverse is that one. This one is going to tell us. So the direction of this action is inverse. If we were going to say we tell them, remember, a big squay hayak, we to that one, same as this one, ikakweitsimaya. This is also in the regular direction, I guess you would say. This one is in the inverse direction. If you look at the difference between those, right? This is direct, and this is inverse. If we look at our chart, our scary chart, that's the difference between these the blue boxes, and the orange boxes, okay? Because the difference here is, let me just write this out the other way. If I say, we tell that one, sorry, this is singular, not plural. I would say, and I'll use the conjunct just for fairness, witamaya. That's the way I would say that. But if we invert it, I'll keep these in the same order. The arrow's the other direction now. Okay. As we tell that one, you could say. This one, a okay, as that one tells us. See the difference? The difference there is the direction right here. This one is going, we'll do it in, we'll do it in the same colors as the chart. Blue. And this one's going the other direction. It's orange. So when you look at your chart, okay, that's the difference. So if we look at this one, ewitamayak, us to that one, we're here. Us, this is going to be here. Sorry, that's tiny. I'll make it bigger. Us right here. We're in the conjunct, so we're going over to the second set of boxes. Ewitamaya. I put an underline because you can take whatever's underlined here, witam, and you can put it in that box. This witam right here. You put it in here. This one. Witam. Ewitamaya. Okay, that's us to that one. But it's not direct, it's inverse. We've just established that. That ego. Okay, this ego in there sort of inverts it if you want to think of it that way. Ewitamagoyak, but we have that boundary where there's that long, short AW and I at the morpheme boundary turns into a long A. That's this A right here. And we end up with ewitamagoyak. It's inverse, and that's this one right here. Ewitamagoyak. Oh, sorry, the one above it. Ewitamagoyak. That's this box here. So that'd be this chunk. Ewitamagoyak. So it lives on this chart. Oops. It lives on this chart. Okay, that's a lot. I know, because that one got deep into conjugation inverse territory. Okay, let's keep going. There's more grammar in here. We're not even through the first sentence. We're just still the first paragraph. We read, okay, tanse wa utagawi pig squehayak, myron paske minutawi geteaya, ikakoitsimaya, kawitamagoya. That ga means going to, or to tell us. If we say, we've asked him, gawitamagoyak, to tell us, ayatsimwin, some stories, I guess you'd say, or anihiniso, those two, I think, what does it say over here? These are two stories from the time before Europeans arrived here. Anihe, these, I would have expected ohe, but anihe works, I guess. Those two from before the Europeans arrived, I guess. So what's some more grammar here? Gagi tagotate. There's another one. Gagi tagotate, which is effectively in the conjunct. So here's another one. Gagi tagotate. All right, so what does that mean? How do we find it? Yeah. Gagi, this is effectively when it happened in the past. You could think of it that way, I guess. And then tagotate. This one's kind of easy because it's just, this is a no longer a VTA, this is a VAI. And this comes from, you could say like when they arrived. You could say that. But this one comes from tagoteo. And you hear this a lot. That one arrives. Generally, this implies like by foot, but it doesn't always mean that nowadays. Tagoteo, like they arrive walking, they arrive by foot, something like that. But now people just generally use it to mean they've arrived. Tagoteo. In this case, they're saying before they arrived on the continent, I guess you could say. But how do we know? So tagote is the root, I guess you could say, tagote. And so if we look on our chart again, this one is no longer transitive. It's down here in VAI land. And We know because it ends in that T, tagotate, it's going to be this one right here. A tagotate or ga tagotate or gagi tagotate. Gagi tagotate. And it comes from that tagoteo. That one arrives. So we've covered a few now. We've covered a us to that one to that one to us, and then that one singular. Should we do... Oh, it's 10-2. I'm going to stop there. That's a lot. That's a lot in one kind of sitting. I hope that's helpful. I know this kind of grammar study is not like your typical TikTok content, but usually I just read on TikTok, but when I do my lives, I like to dive in a little bit. Sometimes we'll just read on a live. Sometimes we'll get more in depth, but all right, we'll visit for 5 minutes. I could smell my supper out there. Holy cow, I got a lot of likes on this for having 9 people. That's amazing. Somebody's just wore their thumb right out. All right, we'll visit for 5 minutes before we shut this down. If there's any questions, let me know where you're tuned in from tonight. I see a few familiar faces. Only got called a Tagai once. I didn't see any. I'll just scroll back and double check that I miss any comments. I don't think so. Oh, yeah, I missed one from Neil. Watsier was apparently an old word for hello. I've heard that too, but I hear it used a little bit, but I wasn't sure if it was... Look that up, Watsier. I didn't even know that was a Cree word. Watsier. I always thought that was a Dene word. Any other comments that I missed? Watsier. I don't know if Neil's still here. Does it have like a meaning? Is it just like a greeting, like hello? Joan says anin, which is a Anishinaabe one, right? Does that mean how in Anishinaabe? Pretty sure it does. Ojibwe People's Dictionary. Anin. Let me look it up. I'm searching. I don't know how to spell it. I don't know how to spell nish. I'm struggling. Anin means, yeah, so like they use it as a greeting, like greeting or hello, but it also means how or in what way. Yeah, but I don't, that's all I know. I don't know very little about nish. Anishinaabe. Billy's from my Little Red River Reserve, Saskatchewan. Miyasin. It's good that you showed up. Yeah, Anishinaabe. Yeah. Manantogisik Kimaga. Yeah, we're just wrapping up. I'm going to have supper here in a few minutes. We just got really deep into grammar tonight. And a few people stuck it out, which is good. I try not to, I never know what people want to, it's a challenge, right? Because there's a temptation to keep language stuff really lightweight because, you know, we don't want to like discourage people or scare people off or any of that kind of stuff. But then on the flip side, if we don't get into some of the deeper stuff, like there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. Like once you start getting into, after you've done a few classes or something, after you're like, oh yeah, I can, you know, introduce myself or something. And then you start looking into what's out there and it's like, there's like millions and millions of words in the language, right? And it's really quite in depth. So I don't tell anybody they have to learn like grammar or any of the academic stuff, because, you know, I'm not saying you have to learn it that way. I went that way because those are the resources that was helpful to me. Mind you, the flip side of that is, Gisik says, Maga, they got to learn the structure of the language. That's the way they, if it works for you, right? If it works for you to learn that, it worked for me. So that's the way I did it. I was like, here's the grammar. I just wanted to know. I was taking a class with Ruben Quinn, and I said, okay, how do you say how do you say I want to eat? And he says, Ninote mitsun. I'm like, okay. Ninote. Note means want. I want to eat. Ninote mitsun. Okay. How do you say you want to eat? Kinote mitsun. I'm like, okay. Miyasan. Okay, I get it. You want to eat. Note. Nimitsun I eat. Kimitsun you eat. Kinote mitsun you want to eat. Okay. How do I say I want you to eat? And he says, Kintoe mitenta mitsoyen. And I'm like, what? What? Wait a minute. My brain just broke in that moment. He broke my brain. Kintoe mitenta mitsoyen. I'm like, what? No, is not even in there. How did you get there from? So then I had to learn about verb types. I'm like, how does that even work? Oh, there's different. The way verbs work in Nihio is different than English, right? If I say, I eat, you eat, I want you to eat, the word eat is just the same. It's always, the word eat doesn't, I want to eat or you want to eat, I want you to eat. The word want is the same. It's want, right? Want can be intransitive and transitive in English. It's the same word. But it doesn't work that way in Nihio. You have to know that if you say, I want to eat, the root of that is I eat. Nimitsun, and note is like what they call a preverb that changes it to mean want. Ninote mitsun, I want to eat. But if I say I want you to eat, the way that's, if you want to break it down kind of like the way my learner brain understands it, you first say I want you, and then you say for you to eat. Kintoemten, the mitsoyen, I want you to eat. And that's just the way it is. Like the Gisik, I asked my elder stars, they said, it just is. Because that's the way it is. That way, the way I was told, your brain's colonized right from years of, yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's another good point, right? Like, even if we do, like, I use this stuff, I use the books I read, because it's a resource that I have access to. But it also means that I have to unlearn sometimes, right? Like I lean on the dictionary a lot because it helps me just remember a word, like lock it in. The more places I can see it, the more ways I can try and understand. But then that also means that if somebody says a word out loud, there's lots of times I will I'll look it up. I'll have my phone and I'll look it up, and I'll even take a screenshot. Even if I never look at that screenshot again, it'll just help me remember that word. And it's like a bit of a crutch. It's just like my crutch, the way I learn. Because somebody will say a word, and then they'll say it again. And if I can look it up and see it, then it'll help me remember it. But that's my crutch. That's just the way I kind of learn, eh? I know some people like Neil Redcrow, the way he learns, he'll just hear a word, and he'll just like lock in to other words that he understands, and he'll just learn that way. By Maga Niue, I don't learn that way quite as good. But you know what? I've heard elders, and I don't fault anyone for, like lots of times elders will say, I didn't learn reading books and all that, and that's right. It's 100% right. But as learners, we, especially if we're remote, like I'm remote, I'm in BC right now, so my access to fluent speakers is fairly limited at an interactive level. So, it's okay to use whatever resources you have available to you. And it's okay to not want to use, if you don't want to use a resource, don't use it, right? Because there's stuff out there. If it doesn't work for you, I read on my TikTok because I try to break that idea that, like, when you see this writing system, this SRO writing system, I hear people say, oh, those are white man's letters, I don't want to use those. But this writing system is based on the syllabics, and it was developed by our elders, right? Those aren't English sounds. So I try to break down that that misconception that those are, because we inevitably do kind of end up writing stuff down, and we try to read it. And if we try and read with an English voice, if we see those as English letters, then I see a lot of people struggle with trying to pronounce the words correctly, especially when we're reading, because we're still looking at if we can disconnect the sounds of English with those SRO letters and start to see those as Nihio sounds, then I think it gives us a better fighting chance, right? Because our goal is to speak. I think if we're talking about language revitalization, for me, It's not just about archiving or preserving or writing things down. My goal is to speak. I want to speak the language. I want my kids to speak the language. Mitane omaya. I natagawa atene the pigskoitik I and twasim sakotenigan. I really want them to be able to the pigskoitik mina stota kika pigskoitawe. When somebody speaks the language, I want my kids to understand. I want them to have a head start. So we try to use the language every day in our house. I've got so Star says I thought some preacher made the syllabics. I've got a story for you. I've got two stories for you actually. I don't believe that, and I've heard people from some community out east that they argue adamantly that those were made by a priest, by James Evans, he was called. But I'm going to show you this chart. I learned this syllabics chart. I got it here. I still got my notes from my first class. This was from September 10th, 2019. This chart right here. Okay. So this chart right here was taught to me by Reuben Quinn, and I know there's lots about this. You could learn this chart in an afternoon. When I first started learning syllabics, I did some research, and there's this fellow named John Murdoch who wrote a paper in the 80s. He did a bunch of research, and he researched into a bunch of correspondences from the origin of the syllabics, the correspondences of the early missionaries that were pushing west. And in chapter 3 of that paper, there are 3 quotes from correspondences from those missionaries where they had printed out Bibles in the syllabics, and they had sent them out they brought them to communities, Western communities that had never had contact with the missionaries before, and they found that they could already read them. They could already read the syllabics. And they wrote it in their own letters, and they wrote home about it. So there's a few examples in there where and there was another one where they said the women, the children, the men, everybody could read it. That they could read those syllabics. So that was one. The fellow's name is John Murdoch. He was from the University of Winnipeg, I believe. And I think that paper was like 1981 or 84 or something like that. And so it's a really good read. It's about the origin of the syllabics. But I'm going to share this story with you. Because I learned the syllabics from Reuben Quinn, that star chart that I just showed you. Okay? And I've known them for a few years. And we go to ceremony with a fellow, this star chart right here. And there's stories about the star chart and how it relates to the Sundance and different stuff like that. But I'm not going to get into that, but I will tell you this one story. We go to ceremony with Jimmy Ochis is his name. So Jimmy Ochis is one of the runaway people. And he tells the story about how they Wes, big forehead filter. Jimmy Ochis is one of the runaway people, and he talks about how they're Nishnabeg, and they lived out in the bush out by Jasper. And he tells the story about as the settlers were pushing west, he would look back. He was carrying one of the bundles from his father on his back as they were moving west, running away from the settlers that were advancing, and carrying. And he talks about seeing this the tears on his father's face as he was encouraging them to keep going, and they kept pushing west. And they eventually, the Ochis broke off into 2 groups. One I believe ended up down at Ochis by Sunchild, out by Rocky Mountain House. But there was a group of Ochis that ended up out in the bush, and they tell the story. If you listen to Jim, or I believe it's his sister, they talk about how when they were growing up, they would stare out, they would peek out from behind the bushes and stuff at the people in town, the white people, right? And this is like the 60s and stuff. Like, they never signed treaty. They never had any exposure to any of those folks. And they grew up in the bush. Jimmy tells a story about how when he saw his first birthday cake, he was like a grown person. He saw somebody blow out the candles on a birthday cake, and he ran away because there's teachings around blowing on fire, stuff like that. Anyway, the whole reason I'm telling you this is those people, the runaway people, Peter Ochis, Jimmy Ochis, they were out in the bush. They preserved all of their traditions, their traditional way of life as the runaway people. And one day, not too long ago, I asked Reuben Quinn, I said, Takapigana, who taught you those syllabics, the syllabic chart, the star chart? And he said, Jimmy Ochis. And I was like, no way. That's amazing. I didn't even know. Jimmy Ochis taught him that syllabics chart. I know for a fact that they never had any contact with, they never went to residential schools. They never had any contact with those missionaries. Because that's the story that he talks about. They grew up in the bush out by Jasper. So that for me is enough. I don't need any more proof than that. That Jimmy O'Cheese taught Reuben Quinn those syllabics. That's proof enough for me that it wasn't some missionary, James Evans, that made that up. These syllabics have always been here. They've always been here. Giesek says, Cree, Dene, Inuit all have the same writing system. Yeah, we give the white people too much credit. But James Evans just came and he took that system and went back and printed it so that they could make Bibles, right? So that they could convert the people. But this is the original writing system of this. And there's, if you listen to Jerry Saddleback, he has like in-depth, he tells the long story. I caught a small portion of that story about the origin of the syllabics, and I just remember very little of it. And that was one of the times when he sang I heard that song you heard at the Sundance. He sang a part of it, and he talked about some of the words and stuff, and he talked about kika-ayâsawi-miyitonâwâw in that story. I remember very little of it. I'd love to hear it again, but I don't believe that. The syllabics are they've always been here. And they have so much connection to, Reuben Quinn talks about the 44 natural laws and all of that stuff. It's connected to the Sundance. Anyway, I only know so little, so I'm just being careful the parts that I say because I don't want to misspeak. But I know for my own heart, for my own belief, I know for a fact that these Atakapagan, they've always been here. Holy, any last comments? Big forehead filter. Oh my goodness. That's the way that's why I grow this here, because it's like my counterweight. Eh? A big forehead. How do I kick somebody? I'm gonna kick out this big forehead filter. That's funny. Okay, I'm gonna go eat soon. Billy says, Lala just says to my babe. Awesome. Yeah, no problem. If you ever get the chance to just go listen to Jim O'Cheese, he does a little bit of stuff online, but he's just an amazing storyteller, and he talks about natural law. He talks about his dad and his family and all that stuff, and it's, yeah, Jim O'Cheese is pretty amazing. Okay. Mananto. About animate, inanimate. Oh, I saw that about there was a question about fork and spoon, right? Where was that at? Billy, yeah, we will continue next Sunday. I'll try and be on time next week. I got started about an hour late. I thought there was a question about a fork and a spoon, but I don't see it now. We can talk about animate and inanimate next week. Oh, stars. Tisqua. Let me go back. Tisqua. Oh, why is spoon animate and not fork? I don't know. I don't know that one. And I bet you, I would be willing to put money on there's a community somewhere where fork is animate. I know a few different words for fork, so it's one of those ones where the word is fairly new. I know Eric Wovengray has a theory, I don't know if I should call it a theory, about why some things, I think he said there was like some of the things that, there were certain things that came with the settlers that were related to, was it winter? Was it something? I don't remember. I've heard a few theories, but I don't know. I don't think of it as animate, inanimate anymore. I just think of it as like oma and awa. And there are just some things, like most body parts are inanimate, I think, except for reproductive organs, or animate, or awa. Most things, there's some ceremonial items that are awa, like a sneeze, awa. But most of your sweetgrass and your smudges are oma. And I've heard people say that the pipe is animate, but I've heard other people say that the pipe is inanimate, so I don't know. You just kind of memorize them, and that's the way it is. Yeah. Awa, uma. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that more. I'll go see if I can find. Yeah, Billy, I'm starving. Yeah, I'm gonna go eat. There's pizza and there's something else out there, so I'm gonna go. Would you like to be friends? What a weird question. I'm gonna get going. I'll go find that and see if I can round up some stuff for next week on animate, inanimate. I don't think there's a solid answer as to why. I think you just have to. For me, it's just like you just remember the ones, and then you're like, oh, you remember that community, they don't say Oma for this, they say Oa, and like that's just kind of the way it is. So. Okay, I'm gonna sign off. Spit the ma kakio kitam skat now. Wow, can I ask wow. Kakio gapi gilgo all y'all that come to visit, hang out tonight. Appreciate all of the likes and everything, and we'll see you next Sunday. Okay, spit the ma.